Coogs House. The Houston Cougars get their first Big 12 road win of the year. Big moment for the program. What's it mean? Who showed out in this game? And what's it mean for the rest of the conference as well today on Locked On Coogs?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher, coach Parker Ainsworth, to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, and there might be a few of you today as we're celebrating a road victory, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way you can latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you found us on YouTube, welcome back. It is so good to see you again. Remember, we're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. The next one of those is at 2,000, and we're almost there. So hit subscribe, help us get there. Like and comment on the video. Let us know you're in that contest. If you don't know what to say, you just have no clue what to say after a great win on the road for the Cougs, tell us in a brownie pan, do you go for the corner, the edge, or that gooey center? Now, today's episode, we're going to do a little bit of talking about Houston's road victory over the BYU Cougs. I was about to say the Cougars. The Cougs beat the Cougs. Going to talk about the magnitude of that win in the first segment. Second segment, I want to talk some about who really showed out for Houston in that road contest, because I think that should, frankly, give us some light on what could come down the road in more road contest. I think I've said the word road a lot this episode already. And then the third and final segment, we'll talk about the rest of the Big 12, looking around the conference and seeing what all happened in a more regional scoreboard kind of way. I say regional, it's a national conference, but closer to home kind of way. But first, Houston, if you have not heard yet, if you did not get to watch the game yet, Houston won 75-68. They had a close finish down the stretch in the second half, but ultimately that first half lead they built up, it was something they could ride on out through the end. l.j.cryer led the way with 23 points. Jamal Shead had his own 16. Big defensive performances from Javier Francis and Emmanuel Sharp. Emmanuel Sharp's 9 rebounds led the way in that category. BYU was hot shooting basketball at different points of this game. On the whole, shot well below their averages due to that gnarly Houston Cougar defense. And, you know, there's a lot of people talking about the ins and outs of this game. I watched this game in a very interesting way. I got home from coaching, and Houston-born teacher and coaching my own basketball game just before the end of the first half. Watched the second half, went back and speed watched the first half after the fact, meaning I sped through timeouts, sped through free throws and whatever, right? And as I was putting things together, it was an interesting way to do it because, frankly, watching the first half, knowing the end of game result, it's a lot easier to breathe. You breathe a little bit easier when those, 5-point leads for BYU are happening. But also it kind of really highlighted how resilient Houston was in the course of this win. BYU, tough place to play. An international fan base, very literally. 19,000 person stadium, looked very, very full. I don't have an actual attendance number. Looked very, very full, loud, raucous, rowdy. They had the inflatable, wavy arm men behind the baskets for free throws. Student section going nuts. Houston, in the course of this game, gets banged up. J1 Roberts tweaks an ankle. He's already got a bad knee. Javier Francis takes a spill, has to come out of the game for a second. There was a lot of reasons this game could have gone not Houston's way. There was moments where JoJo Tugler looked kind of like a freshman out there because he's the youngest player in the Big 12 conference and is a freshman, right? Down the stretch, you had 2 different moments in a close game. I believe it was actually tied at both moments where J1 and Emmanuel, J1 as a high post and Emmanuel as a guard dribbling the ball, just turned the ball over unforced. And it felt like at any one of those moments, Houston could have just been like, this one's not going our way, and just let it go. And it never happened. Kelvin Sampson would never let that happen to his teams anyway. But in this hyper-competitive, most difficult conference in all of college basketball, it's incredible to see it play out in person. Even if we knew theoretically or philosophically, that was not a Kelvin Sampson team. A Kelvin Sampson team would never let that happen. Seeing it actually happen that way is still a sight to behold. I had the same kind of thought, frankly, when Sharp missed the front end of the 1-on-1. I had kind of flashback to TCU where J1 Roberts missed the front end of a 1-on-1 before coming down and Houston gave a backdoor layup to lose the game. In that one, could have had very similar moment in this one. Instead, he fought for his own rebound on that. Now, it led to a turnover very quickly thereafter, but it was just kind of a different kind of fight than you'd seen out of Houston earlier this year. I want to give credit too from the same resilience that of Jamal Shead. Jamal Shead found a ton of ways to lead this game without, especially in the second half, being a dominant scorer like he was as recently as the other day against Texas Tech when he had 29 points. And this one, he had 12 points at halftime and just 16 points in the game. The second half, he had one made field goal. Took him nearly 15 minutes to find the basket in the second half. His other 2 points in the second half came off of icing free throws down the stretch. Jamal instead orchestrated the offense, was controlling the defense. You saw him, I mean, we don't have him mic'd up or anything like that, but you can see him giving, verbal cues and pointing and yelling, and he's getting guys in the right spots defensively, getting guys in the right spots on offense, finding ways to get the ball to guys' hands so we can start the hockey assist train or start the swing of the ball. He's just doing all of those things to be a coach on the floor for Houston. Also, I should point out that after having been down at different points in the first half, as a team, Houston never gave up the lead in the second half. They had a briefly tied game for a few different stretches of a handful of seconds here and there, but Houston never trailed in the second half on the road in that tough place to play, in that tough environment. That composure through bad offensive stretches, through bad shooting stretches, through moments when you could have folded is something that's going to carry this basketball team a long, long way. On the road, Houston is able to hold a tremendous three-point shooting team. I mean, top 25 in percentage, number 2 in shot attempts from behind the arc. Houston able to hold them shooting nearly 40% on the season to just 28.9% from three. That ran them off the line, contested shots, and frankly frazzled them so much that they missed uncontested shot down at the end there. Nell did, because it felt like he assumed somebody was going to be in his face on it. Now, I know it felt like at times that their 11 makes were like a ton, but for them, it really was. And they're averaging about 12 and a half makes per game, again, and 38% from three. Houston held them to significant, 11's a lot less points, especially in a close ball game. And then again, from 38% to 28.9%, a big, big drop. And Houston did it to them in their gym. And much like they've done all season, Houston held BYU to double digits as they have done all season, but just over 17 points less than their season average in points per game on the year. Houston did all of this in the place that BYU is the most comfortable, in that high altitude, in that sea of blue and white. They really, really impressed me in all of those ways. And it's the kind of moment where you can see Houston kind of, we knew Houston could have a good basketball season this year. I think the question has been to this point, how good are they really? Where will they really end up? And this kind of a road win in that kind of a road environment, honestly, can kind of propel you. You play Kansas State Saturday at home. You hope to have a great black crowd for the blackout theme there. Then on Monday, you turn around and go, I think it's Monday. Yeah, you turn and go to Texas, right? To Texas, UT Austin. UT Austin has faltered. They've dropped games there before. Can you steal that one and ride this wave into Lawrence, Kansas? Can you go get that one? Can you go steal that one? Gonna be really, really important. I have to say that as I look at this, I think that's a tough stretch a week, obviously, of basketball. But seeing the resilience that they played with against BYU makes me feel confident that, frankly, there's no reason they can't go get all three of those, let alone two out of three or one out of three. Why not take all three? Now, they got a lot of work left to do, but They're riding a victory right now. If you want to keep riding a victory, if you want to keep on that hot streak, if you want to get your own hot streak going, you got to go to FanDuel.com to do it. Now, I know that we're kind of winding down the NFL season. It's conference championship weekend this weekend, and things are kind of wrapping up in terms of football. But right now, new customers can still get in on the action with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place, you heard me right, place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose right now. You look at conference championship weekend. You can go any team you want to, obviously. The Ravens, who have a couple Houston Cougars on their football team, are favored by 3.5 points. It feels like a team of destiny kind of thing. Lamar Jackson's figured it out. He's looking like a second-time MVP. I'm saying to go do that. I'm saying to go put those put that money on those Cougs and do it at FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make that first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, I said in the second segment I want to talk some about the stars of this game, and there's a lot of places you could start on that because there's a lot of different ways different guys impacted winning in this game. Obviously, I think the most notable one we have to go with is offensive juggernaut l.j.cryer because l.j. scored 23 points in this game, hit a bunch of timely. He was 5-9 behind the arc, but they also were very timely. It was not just that he made it, but kind of the run he stopped when he made it, or the distance he created in the score on the scoreboard when he made it. I think the big thing for him is not just that he made threes off movement, threes off the dribble, got in the lane, got some other makes as well. Was 4-4 from the charity stripe, added in 4 rebounds, but in a highly pressurized road environment in the Big 12. And yes, I know BYU is new to the Big 12 like we are, but they clearly have a large raucous crowd. They were top 25 in the country for a reason, right? In that moment, Houston needed an all Big 12 caliber player to put them on their back a couple different moments in this game. l.j.cryer did that. And l.j.cryer transferred to Houston. We talked about him being that guy at that point. But it was nice to see him actually be that guy again because, frankly, it's kind of been a minute. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I really like LJ's game. But, and I would add also, he's improved visibly defensively in his time in Houston already. Like, he is a much better defender now than he was just 2 months ago, right? So I should give credit where credit is due. But the last 2 or 3 weeks, his offensive game that we heard so much about had kind of gone missing. And Houston found a way to get him more involved early, found a way to get him more involved in actions where he was comfortable. And LJ felt comfortable playing the villain in Provo. And it was great to ride those coattails to a victory. 23 points out of the all Big 12 performer from a year ago. Again, that's big time when you need it. That's exactly as you would expect it to be. I mentioned Jamal Shead in the opening segment being a leader without scoring as much in the second half, but Houston built up a big lead in the first half in large part because he got his 12 points as well. 2 or 3 behind the arc in the first half. But the thing that we always do with Jamal Shead is it all builds off of that speed. He is so fast with the ball in his hands, so good at getting downhill through contact that it kind of sets up the rest of his game. That was his first half, right? That was his first half. Manuel Sharp, if we're going to, I think I heard that Kelvin Sampson gave him a hard time in the post game for shooting poorly. If we're going to give him a hard time for shooting poorly, and I know that Sampson did the same, we also need to point out that he had 9 tough and, again, timely rebounds. Emmanuel Sharp found other ways to leave his impact on this game that did not involve scoring. A year ago, I feel fairly certain I would have never said that about Emmanuel. I just don't think I would have. He has always been such a great shooter, but a year ago, between coming off the major injury and being a freshman and I don't think I would have ever found a game where he was as vital to the outcome in his 26 minutes as he was in this one without scoring 10 points. He's just not typically been that guy in his career, especially when it goes 0-2 from behind the arc and stuff. And he was in this basketball game. Now, he did miss a free throw on the stretch that I wish he'd made. It was running to 1-on-1. Wish he made both, frankly. But on the whole, that's another impactful moment. Speaking of guys that had important stretches, Damian Dunn in the first half had a couple of threes that ultimately, like Damian did cool off, and ultimately BYU would later tie up the game in the second half, and Houston then extend that lead back out. But in the moment, those made threes felt incredibly important in creating distance and separation from Houston and BYU. Really, really veteran moves too along the way there. He got an and one layup too. That was a very veteran move of his. He's good at those kinds of things, and frankly, I like having him in that second unit because when the other team has their second on the floor, he's by far the best isolation scorer on the floor for either team in those moments. Really, really fun to watch him grow and develop into that role because it's a very different role than he had at Temple. If you go back and watch those films, right? I remember watching, trying to study him how to beat him last year, and it was a very different role to see him have. Jojo Tugler had flashes. The steal for the dunk was big, big, big time. There will be a moment from him at some point in this basketball season, especially in the Big 12 regular season play, where he gets that steal for a dunk. And he follows it with a half-court play, and he follows the half-court defensive play, and it's like, oh, that energy won us the basketball game. It's coming, folks. It's coming. It was so close a couple different ones to having them in this game, right? I can't wait to see him kind of flip that switch. Maybe it's Kansas State this weekend, right? Maybe it's Kansas State this weekend, but I can't wait to see him flip that switch across the board looking at things. It wasn't necessarily star performance. So I know this is the star performer segment, and it's not a sexy performance as other guys had and whatever. But Houston in this game schematically decided they were going to switch everything. That was the best way to come up with to cut off 3-point shooters because frankly, Houston's shorter at most spots anyway. And so like, hey, instead of like trying to like give him a half an inch extra, trying to fumble through going over the top or whatever, fighting through a screen, let's just switch. Let's just front the post on the roll. Let's take it away with the backside lob on the help side with helping the helper. And let's just switch a lot of things. And Houston switched 1 through 5 throughout the night. I think it's really easy to take for granted, unless you're coaching basketball or watching film very closely, the kind of stress that puts on your center. I know it's easy to think of, especially when you look at, frankly, how they went to scoring with their big fellas down low, especially Khalifa at different points for them at BYU, that is, about how like this puts stress on your little guys trying to cover the other team's big guys. But the truth is, the guys in more precarious positions on this are always your centers out of the perimeter, trying to cover and play with smaller, more agile, athletic guards. I thought in watching the second half first, I thought he played better in the second half than in the first half, admittedly. But watching Javier Francis play perimeter defense with athletic guards that had a constant threat to pull and fire from wherever they were standing throughout the game was tremendous. He did a really, really, really good job of that. It cannot be undersold how that, just being able to do that, allowed Houston to play the kind of ball pressure defense with switching 1 through 5 that they do so well. But with the switchability to then take away those 3-pointers and then again force BYU to season lows in a number of different categories, force them to shoot just 28.9% from 3 instead of 38% from 3, force them to make just 11 threes as opposed to the 12.5 or more they're getting on a normal night. Him being able to step out and cover guys on the perimeter is not common, so don't take it for granted, and is very necessary. So JVR, I thought you played incredibly well in that game. And I know that it's not this sexy stat filling. He had 6 points and 4 rebounds, and that's like the night for him. And so people are going to look at like, well, what did he do? What did he do? He opened up an endless amount of possibilities for Houston defensively in this game to shut down a high-powered offense. And frankly, that's something that sealed the win as much as the 23 points out of Cryer, as much as the 16 out of Shead. Keeping them from scoring also helps Houston win. Now, Houston's not the only team that won on Tuesday night. There were a number of other games around the Big 12, and I want to talk about how some of those results impact Houston specifically, but that requires first talking a little bit talking a little bit about what happened in the rest of the conference. And I will say that I am selfishly, can I say this? Selfishly enjoying watching the rest of the conference um, with some reason. The Big 12 has been a tremendous basketball conference to watch for the better part of a decade now, right? And frankly, when I was a young kid, the conference was the ACC and the Duke Carolina battles, and back when Maryland was in even like the Juan Dixon days, right? Like Steve Francis and Georgetown, all those different schools, right? That ton of fun, Big East, whatever. Now it's the Big 12. It's all the Big 12. The Big 12 is tops, and getting to watch that with a vested interest, I have to say selfishly, as a basketball junkie, X's and O nerd, is really, really fun. It's a lot more fun, frankly, than I would have realized because I watched Big 12 basketball last year, but having some vested interest in it's a very different ball game. Houston, obviously, like we said, won 75-68. Other winners on Tuesday night were TCU at Oklahoma State. West Virginia lost to UCF in Florida, and Texas beat Oklahoma in Norman. So I'm going to go through them in that order very, very quickly. TCU gets a big win for them, and I think it's interesting to watch that one play out because I thought after Houston, both going into the game and after watching the game happen, I thought very highly of TCU. TCU had 3 guys in double figures, with Miller leading the way at 21 points. He played all 40 minutes, I should point out, in that one as well. Again, wins on the road should be cherished. TCU managed to win on the road, so props to them for that one. Central Florida won at home. Central Florida is proving to be that win's going to continue to age well, I think, in this conference because that's a tough place to play and because they sneak up on people a lot. They snuck up on Kansas, snuck up on Texas. Jaden Sellers, who Houston kind of had their way with, he had 18 points in a bounce back performance for them. West Virginia is interesting to watch, interesting to see how they handle things. Frankly, Central Florida was kind of a lot like Houston, able to shut down Raekwon Battle and that kind. Raekwon had 5 points in that game. So Central Florida, taking care of business at home. If Houston beating BYU is the story of the night in the Big 12, the second biggest story would be UT Austin knocking off Oklahoma. Oklahoma is, I guess the AP poll had them at 11th most recently. Oklahoma has had a very good start to the season. Oklahoma has had some trouble in Big 12 play recently, right? Texas did this from a number of angles, but Max Amos, you remember Houston played him a year ago when he was at Oral Roberts. He led the way in scoring for the Cows. He had 22 points. He's their leading scorer in most games as a backcourt guy. He got hot from 3. We saw what Jamal Shead do to him a year ago. So as I'm watching these box scores roll in, I'm like, okay, this looks like a lot like the Max Amos from last year. And I remember what Jamal Shead did then. So, keep those with a grain of salt. Oklahoma has had a great season thus far, but, had a real hard time getting the ball inside. They had 1-4 to the 15 points, but the rest of their front court had a combined 8. Not their path to victory, does not feel like, on the season as it stands. And what's interesting in looking at that on the whole is that, I know AP poll rankings are different than Big 12 rankings and Big 12 standings and stuff like that are a little different. But Houston is currently, as we speak here, as we're speaking after the Tuesday night's games, tied for 3rd in the conference at 4-2. But the 2 teams ahead of them, one of them is Texas Tech. And Houston beat Texas Tech for Texas Tech's 1 loss on the conference. Texas Tech sitting at 4-1 currently. Kansas State, the other team, is also 4-1. Houston gets to play them this upcoming weekend. Could hand them, theoretically, their second conference loss. And then Houston would have the tiebreaker and could move up into second place in the conference, regardless of what happens to Tech. We do know that Houston will have the tiebreaker against Tech, though. Obviously, they can get there. And I say that to say that it's a lot of noise around Houston, outside coming in, I should say, about how Houston's going to handle being in this conference. And a lot of critics, frankly, pointing out, They didn't play a ranked team all non-conference. And what are they going to do when they see so-and-so and such and such and right? I see all that and I see Houston having a historic defensive year. Houston, while they're not playing AP or coaches poll ranked teams, playing 4 quad 1 games and non-conference playing winning all of them. Houston knocking out a ranked BYU on the road in Provo, Utah. Houston continuing to take care of business at home. Houston's defense holding teams to, on average, more than 10 points per game, less than their scoring. Houston doing a bunch of different things to take control of this conference. And frankly, Houston in a spot where in the next 10 days, they may very well take complete control over the best conference in all of college basketball. Now, a couple things to be said here. One, and I had a coach told me as early as middle school, potential just means you ain't done it, son. And that is, I mean, Houston's got the potential to do it for sure. They have not done it yet. It's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be an easy 10 days, but it's possible, right? So that's the first step is they got the potential, but it doesn't mean they've done it yet. Two, frankly, after that 10 days, you got to retest and try it all out and earn it all back all over again because it doesn't get easier after those 10 days. You still got to go through the rest of the Big 12 regular season and the Big 12 tournament and so on. And then three, as we've seen with teams like last year's team that won over 30 games and a couple different teams that did very well in the American and had historic runs. I mean, Houston's lost very few games in the last half decade. It still comes down to what you do in March. And this is all getting ready for that run in both the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. And so while it's fun to hold on to these things and rent these things, as Kelvin Sampson said about the number one overall in the AP poll kind of thing before, renting these top spots in different standings is just renting. And rent is due over and over and over and over again. And so as Houston continues to chip their way up and climb their way up to getting to pay that rent, I am more looking forward to watching them pay those bills than worried about any kind of climbing of any kind of sort. Now, we're going to be following it and the upcoming exciting football season with Willie Fritz and all things Big 12 conference here each and every day at Locked On Coogs. So if that's your cup of tea, thank you for making it this far. And thank you for making this your first listen. Hit that subscribe button so we can talk to you again tomorrow. Locked On Coogs is Prime Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. For a second listen, go check out Locked On College Basketball, covering the entire college basketball landscape. Thank you all so much again for listening. Locked On Coogs. Remember, Locked On Podcast Network. You and your team, our Coogs, every day. Go Coogs.